So if a science fiction movie wins the Academy Award, does this mean we've gone mainstream? Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. I'm an astrophysicist. I write for Ordinary Times, and this is The Throughput. So I'm making this video on Monday, March 13th, and last night was the Academy Awards, at which the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once swept the awards, including Best Picture. I've not made a full video on Everything Everywhere. I did mention it in my video on multiverses up here. I like the movie quite a bit, and I'm very glad that it won Best Picture. I did think it was the Best Picture of the year quite easily. But one of the things I mentioned last night was that this was the first time a science fiction movie has won Best Picture. Now, one of my colleagues at Ordinary Times, Louis Mendez, who writes the Mendez Movie Report, you should definitely check out his work, did mention that The Shape of Water won a few years ago, but I would classify The Shape of Water more as a fantasy film. My rule of thumb, and keeping in mind it's just a rule of thumb, it's not a law of nature, is that if a plot revolves around magic, it's fantasy, whereas if it revolves around technology, it's science fiction. So I would still say that Everything Everywhere is the first science fiction movie to win Best Picture. And I was thinking about this, and one of the requests that I've gotten is to talk about what my favorite science fiction movies are, my top 20 science fiction movies, the best science fiction movies of all time. And I've kind of shied away from that because it's always really hard when you get to great science fiction movies to say this one is better than that one. So I thought of a different way of doing this was I would go through the years and look at some of the classic science fiction, some of my favorite science fiction films, and look at how the Academy has treated science fiction in the past and give my opinion on whether these movies should have won Best Picture or should have at least been nominated for Best Picture, whether they were the best movie of the year and the Academy just ignored them because they didn't think much of science fiction. I think it was Michelle Yeoh who made a point last night that the Academy has had a tendency to ignore genre pictures. Now, I think that was true. They do have this tendency to favor artsy movies about Hollywood and costume dramas about French kings and stuff like that. But we have seen that break a little bit. They did recognize a Western many years ago. I mean, Lord of the Rings is a genre picture, and it dominated the Academy Awards in 2003. So let's go over the previous years and see what movies could have been nominated for Best Picture, what movies could have won Best Picture, and how the Academy has treated them over time. I think it will become clear that what the method to my madness is really quickly. The other reason I wanted to do this was to introduce my rating system. When I first started this, I was giving movies kind of letter grades, A, B, C, as to how their scientific accuracy. But I mentioned this in the comments a few weeks ago that I was toying with a new system, and that is to give movies two ratings. One is to give them a rating on just overall quality. Let's take something astronomical like stars and give them 1 to 5 stars depending on how good they are. But the other rating would be on how scientifically accurate they were, and this would be a rating of face palms, with 1 face palm being a movie that's got most of it right and 5 face palms being a movie that gets almost everything wrong. So we're going to go through the movie years, we're going to talk about the movies, and I'm going to rate them and where they could have ended up historically. So the first Academy Awards were in 1929, and they considered movies from 1927 to 1928. There were no prominent science fiction movies in that period, but right before then was one of the most important science fiction movies in history, which was Fritz Lang's masterpiece, Metropolis. If you have not seen Metropolis and you do not mind silent movies, this is really something to see. It was visionary in its time, doing things with special effects that would not be matched by American filmmakers for decades. It, of course, is steeped in the politics of the 1920s and 30s of workers' struggle versus the ruling class and that sort of thing. But it has a humaniform robot that could be turned to evil purposes. It has this mega city in which has to be sustained by slave labor below. It is bursting with ideas. Since I first saw it in the 1980s, they have discovered a lot of lost footage, and so it's much longer and closer to the vision that Lang originally had. Definitely a 4-star movie. In terms of scientific accuracy, it doesn't do a lot of science. It has kind of fanciful robots and stuff like that. I'd probably give it 2 face palms. It doesn't get too much wrong. Doesn't venture too much into unfamiliar territory. Would this have won the Academy Award had it been eligible? I don't think it would have even been nominated. I don't think the Academy would have been aware of this, and certainly something as revolutionary and as unusual as Metropolis would not have come to their attention. Wings won the first Academy Award. That is also actually a really good movie, and I do recommend it. Clara Bow, especially if you're a fan of hers, wonderful actress to watch in that. Would I have picked it over Wings? I probably would have because I'm a science fiction fan, but I certainly don't think the Academy can be blamed for missing this German film that was very unusual for its time. Now we skip ahead to 1931. Grand Hotel would win the Academy Award for that year, but that was the year of another classic science fiction movie, Frankenstein. I would easily give it 4 stars, maybe 5 stars, depending on what kind of mood I'm in. Just a wonderful depiction of Mary Shelley's classic, and really set another movie that sort of established the genre of black and white science fiction / horror movies. Probably gets 2 face palms, maybe 3, because you can't really reanimate dead tissue that way. When people die, things start to happen to their bodies that make them kind of unresurrectable, and so you would not be able to take corpses and reanimate them this way. I have not seen Grand Hotel. I have not heard pretty amazing things about it. I think it certainly would have been nominated in a modern era, but it didn't even get any attention from the Academy.
Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Oh, in the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
Now, in 1935, Mutiny on the Bounty was the best picture, and I've seen that. It's a good movie, but I actually would have given the award to Bride of Frankenstein. This was a rare instance where the sequel was probably better than the original. 4 or 5 star movie. It was actually nominated for Best Sound Recording, so the Academy was certainly aware of it. This is another 3 facepalm movie because you can't reanimate corpses like that, but just a wonderful picture, a really tragic picture. In 1951, An American in Paris won the Academy Award, but that was also the year that the original The Day the Earth Stood Still was released. This is a 4-star movie for me. It's a message movie that talks about how human beings need to shy away from the destructive path we were on. This was near the beginning of the Cold War, soon after we had started building and arming ourselves with atomic weapons, so it certainly had that message to me. Nothing terribly horrifyingly scientifically inaccurate. I mean, the aliens do possess kind of magical technology and so forth. So 2 or 3 face palms based on that, but definitely a good movie. I don't think it would have done anything at the Academy Awards. It wasn't even nominated for anything, but a classic movie nonetheless.
Klaatu, Marata,
1956 sees The Forbidden Planet. I have done a video on this one. I rated it quite well. It is definitely a 4-star movie. I called it the hidden prequel to Star Trek. If you like Star Trek, you will really like The Forbidden Planet. It did actually get a nomination for Best Special Effects, and given the time that it was made, it was well deserved. I don't think it would have been in the Best Picture race, but that year the Academy Award went to Around the World in 80 Days, and it's generally regarded as one of the worst picks of all time. So I think you could have done worse than Forbidden Planet that year. Easily a 4-star movie. I would probably give this 2 face palms. It has a lot of accurate stuff in it. It does have very powerful aliens who have almost magical powers. So that's why I'm not going to give it 1 face palm, but really deals with a lot of interesting scientific concepts and deals with them quite well.
Come on, Doc. Let's have it. But the Krell forgot one thing. Yes, what? Monsters, John. Monsters from the id. The id? What's that? Doc.
Now, going into the 1960s, in 1964, you have Dr. Strangelove, which shows up on a lot of lists of science fiction movies. It's a great movie. It's easily a 4 or 5 star movie, and it doesn't deal with a lot of complicated scientific concepts, so I'm going to just give it one facepalm. It did win the Hugo Award for Best Science Fiction and Fantasy Film, so that's why I kind of included it on this list, and it was nominated for Best Picture, which would make it the first kind of science fiction movie to get a Best Picture nom. I certainly would have picked it over My Fair Lady. I mean, that's a fine movie, but Dr. Strangelove was a great movie.
You're talking about mass murder, General, not war.
Mr. President, I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, but I do say no more than 10 to 20 million killed, tops, depending on the breaks.
Stanley Kubrick got a lot of nominations and never won anything, which was a pity because he made a lot of great movies, including in 1968, the visionary movie 2001. I have done a full review of this. This is a 5-star movie with one facepalm. It is a great movie, and it deals with very interesting scientific concepts and deals with them very well. 2001 got 3 nominations, including Best Director. Now, leaping ahead to 1971, we have A Clockwork Orange. It deals with a technique that is used to try to drive violent impulses out of a human being. It deals with complicated concepts like what is meant by free will. Can a person have their personality and their influences changed? The original book actually deals with this in a much more elegant way, where Alex at the end has grown up and sort of rejected violence as a youthful thing that he no longer engages in. It won the Hugo Award. It was nominated for 4 awards, including Best Picture. I would rate this as a 4-star movie and really one facepalm. There's not a lot it gets wrong. 1974, no. We're not talking about that one. 1977 is, I think, one of the most important years in the history of science fiction and movies. That year you had not one but 2 sci-fi classics come out, Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Lucas and Spielberg sort of setting the stage for dominating the next 20 years of film. I was 5 years old when Star Wars came out, and I knew this was something unusual and special. But people who were a little older than me said this really changed everything. It established the summer blockbuster. It established science fiction as a serious genre that could not only win awards and stuff like that, but could make tons and tons of money. Before then, science fiction movies were kind of a niche. You know, they were beloved by nerds and so forth, but they didn't dominate the box office the way Star Wars did. And the Academy recognized this. Star Wars was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And I know people who are still bitter that it lost out to Annie Hall. I personally would have picked it over Annie Hall, which is a fine movie, but wasn't the earth-shaking thing that Star Wars is. You also had that year Close Encounters, which had 8 nominations and is also a classic. Both of these, to me, are 5-star films. Star Wars is, of course, a classic. I have done a review of Star Wars talking about the vision of George Lucas and why I only give it 2 facepalms, even though it has fantastical elements. The vision it had of a large, dynamic galaxy with tons of planets and species is something that was way ahead of its time. Close Encounters is one I would maybe even give 1 facepalm. Its vision of how a first contact with an alien civilization might go was really visionary and imaginative. Both of these are fantastic movies, of course, both with magnificent scores by John Williams, which is part of what makes them so special. But 1977 was the year I think everything changed, when science fiction really became mainstream. I don't think it's a coincidence that this was about a decade after the Apollo mission. I think the Apollo mission fired the imagination of the public and fired their interest in science. Science fiction movies and TV sort of came of age at that time and became a really well-established genre. Now, in 1979, you had Alien. I have done a review of that. This is probably for me a 5-star movie. It's a fantastic movie. I would give it 2 face palms. It deals with a lot of really interesting concepts. It has a few flights of fancy like faster than light travel and so forth, but really has a lot going for it in terms of scientific accuracy. I would easily have picked this over Kramer versus Kramer, which I think is one of the weakest pictures to win a Best Picture. But actually, I probably would have taken Apocalypse Now over both of them, which I regard as a classic movie. And I just recently rewatched and is just amazing. Much as I love Alien, I would probably have not given it the award that year. It did win the Hugo Award, though.
Dallas, are you sure there's no sign of it? I mean, it is there. It's got to be around there.
Dallas?
Now, in 1980, you had The Empire Strikes Back. I have done a video on that one. Easily a 5-star movie, probably a 3 face palm movie for me. It did only get 3 nominations, mostly for technical categories, and that's hard to believe. But if you looked at contemporary reviews, the critics weren't exactly sold on The Empire Strikes Back. It got kind of tepid reviews initially, and it was only over time that the magnificence and beauty of the movie became apparent, until it is now regarded as really a rival to, if not better than, the original Star Wars. Now, 1982 is, I think, one of the great years for science fiction movie. This was where the rewards for Star Wars breaking the mold really paid off. You had 3 great science fiction movies that year. You had E.T., of course, which was a blockbuster hit, had 9 nominations, including Best Picture. Attenborough, when he won the award for Gandhi, actually said that he thought E.T. deserved the award more because it was more imaginative and a more wonderful movie than the one he made. And Gandhi is a very good film, don't get me wrong. I would probably give this 4 stars, maybe 5 stars if I'm in the right mood. There are moments in the movie that just make my heart soar, like the bicycle scene. In terms of scientific accuracy, I think it actually does a lot right. I mean, certainly you have flights of fancy like telekinetic and healing powers and blah, blah, blah. But, I really love that the scientists are seen at first through Elliot and E.T.'s eyes, where they're scary and threatening. And then when we finally meet them, we find out that they are interested in E.T. and they want to know what he's like, and they're not meaning to hurt him or anything like that. There's really not any bad guys in the movie. There's just people with different agendas, and it's really, I think, just wonderfully done in terms of how that kind of thing might go. You also had that year Blade Runner. Now, Blade Runner only got 2 nominations. This is easily a 5-star movie for me. It's just fantastic. Ridley Scott's direction is amazing. It deals with wonderful concepts of what it means to be human, where you have these synthetic people, these replicants, who begin to develop their own emotions and break their chains from their masters, and so are given a limited lifespan to keep them under control. And of course, that year you also had Star Trek II. Star Trek II was not nominated for anything, but this is easily a 4 or 5-star movie for me. 3 face palms because it deals with a lot of fantastic concepts like Genesis. Maybe I'll do a full review of that. Now, 1986 brings us Aliens, which was in my Aliens video, which I have talked about. I am clearly a fan of this movie, 4 or 5-star movie for me. Another 2 facepalm movie. This actually got a lot of love from the Academy. It got 7 nominations, including a Best Actress nomination for Sigourney Weaver. Now, Platoon won Best Picture, and there's no way Aliens was going to beat out Platoon.
From her, you bitch!
So that brings us up to 1993 when Jurassic Park hit the screen. This was another just mega hit for science fiction. Surprisingly, this only got 3 Academy Award nominations, all in technical categories, and I find that hard to believe because this was a great movie. This is easily a 4, maybe 5-star movie, and 2 face palms I would give it. Just having DNA does not allow you to recreate a creature. It's more complicated than that. One of the things I do like about this movie is it represented the sea change we had in how we saw dinosaurs. When I was a kid growing up, dinosaurs were mostly seen in movies as monsters, things that roared and ate people. Whereas Jurassic Park was the first really big movie to show dinosaurs as animals, creatures that had habits and behavior. that moved in herds and hunted and ate and had all these kind of behaviors that we associate with animals. You know, my son is now into dinosaurs. It's been amazing to see how different it is now, where when you open dinosaur books, they don't talk about how fierce they were and how they fought other dinosaurs, but when they lived, what their environment was like, what they ate, how they reproduced, what predators they had, or who they predated upon. And so Jurassic Park was a big part of that sea change in how our culture views dinosaurs. Now, that was the year of Schindler's List, which is, of course, a fantastic movie, and I would not have given it the award over that, obviously, but I think it should have at least been nominated for, like, Best Director or Best Picture, because this is really a great movie and has aged extremely well.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds.
1999 was, first of all, a fantastic year for movies. You had American Beauty, you had The Sixth Sense, you had Being John Malkovich. Comparing the best pictures of 1999 to modern eras where they're all sequels and franchises is just amazing contrast. You also had a movie called The Matrix. The Matrix is one of those movies that really changed how movies are made and inspired, I think, a lot of people to make movies. It's definitely the best thing the Wachowskis have ever made. And I still actually, I have a high opinion of some of their other movies. I would probably give it 5 stars in terms of quality. I watched this recently and still it's a fantastic movie. It has aged quite well. I would probably give it 3 facepalms in terms of scientific accuracy. You probably could not get enough energy out of human bodies to justify keeping them alive. It only got nominations for technical categories. I think that was a great year for movies. It's probably one of my favorite movies, but there were half a dozen movies you could have made the case for Best Picture for that year. It was just an amazing year. You also had, that did not get any nominations, but is a personal favorite of mine, Galaxy Quest. I'm not going to, this is 4-star movie for me, probably 4 face palms because it's more silly than trying to be accurate in terms of science. But it really is an enjoyable movie with a wonderful cast. It has aged extremely well. If you like Star Trek, or even if you don't like Star Trek but like science fiction in general, it's just a fantastic movie to watch. I actually am one of those who would rank it as one of the best Star Trek movies, to be honest.
Hi there, God! Did you guys ever watch the show?
2004 brings us to another one of my favorites, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This is another really interesting concept movie where the idea is that people pay a company to have bad experiences removed from their memory so that they can forget things that they don't want to remember. And it deals with these 2 people who had a bad relationship and are trying to have their memories of each other erased, and then one of them changes their mind in the middle of it. Really great, well-directed movie, really interesting concept, great acting performances from Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet, who is one of my favorite actresses. This is easily a 5-star movie for me. Maybe 2 facepalms because while the technology is kind of fanciful, human minds are not like computers. You can't really go in and erase memories like that. I would definitely have taken this over $1 Million Baby. I think it should have at least been nominated for Best Picture because it was easily one of the top 5 pictures of that year.
Okay.
2006 brings us Children of Men. This is another movie I just love. 5 stars easily for me and 1 facepalm. It deals with the concept of what happens if human fertility just suddenly disappears overnight. It doesn't go into the reasons for that, but it's sort of a society study of what happens when people lose hope for the future. It really only got 3 nominations, and that just baffles me. How did this not get a Best Director nomination for the amazing work that was done behind the camera by Cuarón? I don't know if I would have picked it as the Best Picture. I think Letters from Iwo Jima was probably my favorite picture of that year, but certainly I think should have been nominated.
Stop! Ceasefire! Ceasefire!
That brings us up to 2008 with WALL-E. This got 6 nominations and 1 Best Animated Picture, and WALL-E is just a wonderful film. 5 stars, one of the best Pixar movies ever made. I'd probably give it 2 face palms because it does deal with a lot of fanciful stuff, and WALL-E is able to travel across the universe in very short spans of time and so forth. I also disagree with its vision of a dystopian future. Maybe I'll do a full review of this. My children love this. It has aged extremely well. This is just one of the best pictures of not only of that year, but probably of the 2000s decade. 2009 is another one of those watershed years, kind of like 1977 or 1999. That year, not only 1, but 2 science fiction films nominated for Best Picture. The first was Avatar, which was nominated for 9 awards, including Best Picture, but kind of shockingly lost out to The Hurt Locker. Avatar is sort of poorly regarded these days. I'd probably still give it a 3-star movie, and I might do a full review of that. I'd probably give it 2 face palms. It deals with a lot of interesting concepts, and they did a lot of world building that was behind the scenes, so that when they were talking about Pandora, they had sort of a guide to make it consistent and make it kind of realistic. And so I do think a lot of the work that was done into making Pandora was quite well done. It probably got its nomination because it was revolutionary in terms of its 3D imaging, and just the visuals were really spectacular. District 9 is the other one. This got 4 nominations, including Best Picture. 4 stars, probably 2 face palms, deals with a few fantastical things like faster than light travel and so forth. But a really, really fun movie, and a really interesting exploration of what it might be like if aliens sort of crash landed on the Earth and were stranded here, and how we might treat them, how the humans might interact with their culture and their technology and try to exploit them and so forth. Kind of a more dark side vision of E.T. or Close Encounters, where you have where those showed the more optimistic view of alien contact. This shows the more pessimistic view of it, and so forth. Both of them recommended. Both of them very good films.
You boy. Go. You have to make it. Don't make me go through all of this and not like it. You understand? Go now before I change my mind, man.
The reason I say that changed things is because in the 2010s, we had science fiction films nominated for Best Picture almost every year, and many of them deserved it. I've never heard anyone say we're in a golden age of science fiction movies, but it's really been amazing to watch the Academy, I think especially after they expanded the list of Best Picture nominees to 10, to see them embracing science fiction, not necessarily in giving them the top prize, but at least nominating them and recognizing that this can be a realistic genre, and studios investing in top-line actors and top-line directors and really good production values to make great movies that make a lot of money and got lots of awards. In 2010, you have Inception, nominated for 8 awards, including Best Picture. A 5-star movie for me easily, with dealing with interesting concepts of dreams, and whether you could implant ideas in someone's mind or take something out of someone's mind. Kind of probably a 2 or 3 facepalm movie, because that technology is kind of fanciful, and really human minds don't work that way and dreams don't work that way. 2013, you have Gravity, which got 10 nominations, including Best Picture, led the field in nominations, and won Best Director for Cuarón. Even though it deals with hard science fiction, this probably gets 3 face palms. There are a lot of inaccuracies in this movie. It has a lot of interesting concepts, and there's a lot of stuff that's accurate, but there's a lot of stuff that's inaccurate. For example, its vision of space is very close, where this debris and the space stations and the space telescope are all on similar orbits. That's not the way orbits work. These things tend to be on different orbits. This is one that Chris Hadfield actually addressed in his video, link above. But just a really well-made movie with a standout performance by Sandra Bullock. You also had that year Her, which dealt with the concept of AIs and whether you could develop a relationship with them. 4 stars, 2 face palms, a little bit fanciful in terms of some of the stuff it does, but a really wonderful made movie with a great performance by Joaquin Phoenix. Got 5 Academy Award nominations and really deserved them. Another great film. You had 2 great films that year. Then you just go to the next year, 2014, Interstellar. 5 nominations, 1 win, mostly in the technical categories. Now, I like this movie. I actually would rate it 4 or 5 stars, probably 2 face palms in terms of scientific accuracy. But this is kind of a controversial film among astronomers. I know a lot of astronomers who hate this movie. Now, part of that is based on a disagreement over the science. A lot of astrophysicists think the science in the movie is badly wrong. Kip Thorne, who was the advisor, has written a book about why the science is right. I have read that book. I think Kip Thorne has the better argument in many cases, although he talks about many cases where Chris Nolan decided to do things scientifically and accurately because it made for a better film. And so I probably will do an in-depth dive into Interstellar, but really a movie I at least like. Then you have the next year, Mad Max. Definitely a science fiction movie set in a dystopian future. 10 nominations, including Best Picture. A 5-star movie for me, one of my favorite movies of the last decade. An absolutely smashing film that's just well directed, just great performance from Charlize Theron. I love the character of Nux and his arc. I love the way the action scenes are filmed, so there's coherence and you can understand what's going on. This is just one of the best films of the 2010s as far as I'm concerned. You also had that year The Martian, which got 7 nominations, also including Best Picture. Also one of my favorite films of the 2010s, easily a 5-star movie, and probably a 1 facepalm movie. Andy Weir researched the hell out of this movie. And when he was initially writing the book, I was doing it on his blog and kind of crowdsourced it so people would point out ideas and things he gotten wrong and ideas he might utilize. Just wonderfully accurate. Just if you love technical stuff, it just goes into it in such depth and with such accuracy. And of course, I mentioned the Hermes in my video on spaceships. It's one of my favorite spacecraft of all time. Just a wonderful movie. And then the next year, 2016, you have The Arrival, which got 8 nominations, including Best Picture. This is a 4 or 5-star movie for me. I probably have to watch it again, but it deals with so many interesting concepts where you have these aliens where we're trying to communicate to them, but they think differently than we do. They experience time differently than we do. And a whole bunch of the movie is dedicated to the efforts of Amy Adams' character to find a way to communicate with these and cross that boundary so that we can talk to each other and understand each other. Just another wonderful movie dealing with first contact. Probably 2 facepalms. It has a little bit of fantastic stuff, but just a 5-star easy movie across the board, and probably one that should have been really considered for Best Picture. And the next year, 2017, you have Blade Runner 2049, which got 5 nominations, mostly in technical categories. This is one I'd rate 4 or 5 stars, almost on par with the original Blade Runner. Just a fantastic movie that deals with concepts like AI and developing relationships with AI. And again, going back to this idea of artificial people and whether they can survive and what happens when they mate and what happens when they plan a revolution and how you keep them in line and obedient and so forth. Just takes a lot of the concepts from the original Blade Runner and builds on it very well. And then the next year, 2018, you have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which won Best Animated Picture, and I think should have been up for Best Picture. It was one of the best movies of the year, easily. 5-star movie, 2 facepalms for the multiverse stuff, but really just a fantastic, wonderful, enjoyable film that I can watch over and over again. And every time I do, I see something new about it. And that year you also had Black Panther, which had 7 nominations, including Best Picture. It deals with futuristic technology, like the vibranium and so forth, and this super advanced culture and how they interface with the rest of the world. I really like this movie. 4 or 5-star movie, maybe 2 facepalms. In terms of scientific accuracy, because the vibranium's kind of a whatever device. And that brings us up to the 2020s, where we had Dune nominated for Best Picture a couple of years ago, and this year we had Avatar: The Way of Water and Everything Everywhere nominated, and they both won. What really jumps out to me is how things have changed. Science fiction for many years, up until Star Wars, was this obscure genre. You had movies like THX 1138 and so forth, and people would watch them and enjoy them, but they didn't really have this resonance. Over the last 45 years, we have seen these movies become more and more mainstream, more and more part of our culture. We have seen more and more movies coming out that have big stars and big budgets and get nominated for Academy Awards, and this year finally win Best Picture. Science fiction has really come of age, and I think the Academy finally recognized that this year with recognizing this wonderful motion picture and Everything Everywhere. A few years ago, I saw an interview with Andy Weir. And one of the things they were talking about was why science fiction is so popular. At that time, the most popular show on television was The Big Bang Theory, which was about physicists. And why geekiness had gone from, when I was a kid, being something that was shunned. If you were a Star Trek fan, you kept that quiet. And especially if you were a Doctor Who fan, you kept that quiet. and nerds were something that were seen as bad and oppressive, and you didn't want your kid to be a nerd, to something that's cool and chic, and where the nerds in TV are heroes and so forth, and where science fiction is now mainstream. And he said that he thought the reason was because one day the press looked up and they realized that the richest men in the world were geeks. They were men like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, technical guys, nerds, people who love technology and love science and devote themselves to this. Whatever your opinion of those men is, I know a lot of you probably dislike one or more of those men, but they are very influential. And I think that is what has changed in our culture. And I think the acceptance of science fiction by the Academy, culminating in Everything Everywhere winning the award, has been part of that cultural shift. I think we're going to see more of this in the future. More great science fiction movies being made, more great science fiction movies being nominated, more great science fiction movies winning. And it's just, I really look forward to the next few decades of this. Next time I'll be back with a full review of another movie. I think it will be a bit of a surprise to you guys what I do with it, but I hope you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, I'm Mike Siegel. I write for Ordinary Times. Thank you for watching.